Welcome to the Destinations with Doni podcast, where we explore your cultural passions. Destination home, cuisine, community, relationships, and passion. Embrace your cultural identity as we bring you the tools to live in full color. And it's interesting, Diana and I were speaking. So as listeners know, I'm from Costa Rica and Trinidad. And John is from Guatemala, but lived in Costa Rica for his parents still live there, right? He goes back there all the time.
Yep.
And then Diana, of course, is from Yucatan and Merida. And so it was interesting. Diana and I were speaking, even though Merida is in Mexico, it's more like a Central American country. I mean, they're technically borderlanders. It was a good point that she brought up. And in case you don't know, Isis, a borderlander is someone. So if you live in Seattle or what's the place in upstate in New York by Niagara Falls, Hayden?
Buffalo.
Buffalo.
Places like that where you're on the border, or even Nogales, Arizona, on the border of two countries, or you could look at Switzerland and Germany, all different places, and the culture melds together, right? And so people on both sides have a little bit of each one. And so Deanna and I were speaking about how Merida really is more like Central American culture than North American culture, than Mexican culture. And I could relate to that because I felt that when I was in Merida. And John, I don't know how what do you think about that?
Oh yeah, my dad always tells a joke about, way back when, the U.S. turned around and took Texas from Mexico. So then Mexico turned around and took Yucatan and Chiapas from Guatemala. Then Guatemala turned around, tried to take a piece of El Salvador or Honduras and got the crap kicked out of them. So yeah, that's something also I noticed as well as, and of course, Lupita Nyong'o was born in Mexico, although not raised there. Her Spanish is okay when she's speaking extemporaneously. Obviously, in the movie, it was.
I was going to say, in the movie, her accent was
no. Of course, but she's a professional actor. Just like her accent, her Korean accent in the first movie was also very good.
True.
So,
and
but
her
she trained for it.
accent was really good too.
That's so that's one thing I noticed when I was growing. Once I was growing up and went back to Guatemala, like maybe the second to last time or the last time, was we were down at the market and buying, I think it was acerrín, which is like this colored sawdust that we use to for nativity scenes to make paths and grass and that kind of thing. And I was talking to the woman who was selling it, or my dad was talking to the woman who was selling it, and I for the first time realized, and she's clearly obviously indigenous, and I realized she had a distinct I guess you can call white Guatemalan accent, a Spanish fully fluent, but it was very clipped and very specific, and that's when Lupita was talking to the indigenous woman, and she was talking back to her in Spanish. The woman was talking back to her in Spanish. The theater didn't have the sound wasn't that good, but this is why I want to ask Diana, what was her accent? Mexicana de la DF or like indigenous? I couldn't quite tell. Okay,
go ahead, Diana.
I mean, the thing is that in Mexico, the country, they kind of make fun of us in the Yucatan Peninsula because of the specific accent that we have. I think it even kind of goes to my English. Like, I have that accent from the Mayan words. The thing is that, I don't know how to explain it, but the thing is that to speak Mayan, you have to have these kind of sounds, like sounds. So that's why while we're speaking Spanish, we still have those accents to speak in Mayan. So we even have words in Maya, like normal day, like we say kosh, which is let's go. So to say kosh is not like a normal word, so we have that accent, and I think that goes to our Spanish. So in that part where Lupita was like, yes, I'm a student from Merida, I'm like, yes, I'm from Merida too. And then she starts speaking like Mayan to that lady. I was like, yes, thank you. I don't know. It was really nice to hear
I actually felt the same way. I felt the same way. Like it was like it's and her. I know John. You said she's an actor, but yeah, her accent was on point I really liked it, and I felt like I went down and spent time with Diana's family, and I look forward to going back. But yeah, it's different and it's wonderful. I mean, español es más suave, see, and I like the way the Mayan accent changes that uh, the Spanish, and it's easier. I know it's easier for me to understand. I'll tell you that.
I read, I read somewhere that Lupita actually lived in Mexico for a certain amount of time, which is where she gets
Yeah, she's a
the
TCK. She's
yeah,
a third culture kid. Yeah.
She has,
Yes.
my understanding, she also has actual Mexican citizenship because she
She
yes,
obviously
does.
was
Yeah.
born there. But
yeah.
yeah, beyond that, yeah.
Actually, one of our very first issue, our launch issue of Cultures was in Kenya, and we spent a month. We took a team to Kenya for a month, and we did a full magazine of coverage. So actually, some of our team that put together that issue and wrote and took photos, etc., in that issue went to school and with Lupita, like understand her family because she's Kenyan as well. So it's interesting, and it's interesting. It was interesting talking to them and the things they know because they experienced it. They're like, no, that's not real. This is what happened. We were there, right? And I'm like, well, but the news report said. So yeah, she is a TCK. She partially grew up in Mexico, and some of the comments I've seen are people saying, hey, why are Mexicans trying to co-opt Lupita? She's African. But that comes back to what Cultures is about, right? The whole cross-cultural thing, having a foot in two or more worlds. We understand what's that like what that's like, and I embrace that she is that way. I wonder how she feels about it. It would be wonderful to talk to her about that one of these days, as well as Tanoke. I don't know about y'all. I fell in love. Like, I don't know. His accent was great. I just love how he played this character, and I know he's very popular and has been in some big shows in Mexico, but this was big for him to come to Wakanda Forever. Go ahead, John.
Listen,
Will be
that's my new
interesting for me
man
to
crush.
see.
I'll take
Your new man crush.
that's my new man crush. It used to be Orlando Bloom. Now it's Tanook.
Well, it'll be really interesting to see what they do, and this is something that Diego Luna did and does in Star Wars Rogue One as well as in Endor. He does his Spanish for the Latin American Spanish dub. He does his own voice for that. They didn't bring in a different another voice actor to do his role. I'll be fascinated to see, and I'm almost hoping that he do this, that for Tenoch, and only for Tenoch, for all of his lines when he speaks in English in the movie, for the Spanish dub, I hope that they bring him back to do the Spanish language dub. Because hearing him in his native language acting out, I think we'll give it a different, he did superbly. I just think it was possibly even a better thing, just doing
Yeah.
idea.
Well, there's we'll probably link to some of the video in that I'm about to talk about. Deanna and I were speaking. I sent her a link to this interview with what's her name that plays Suri. It's escaping me.
Letitia Wright.
Letitia
Wright.
Wright.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, Letitia and Tenoch, and they did a lot of their interviews together. Obviously, when you look at the film, you could see why. But it started out; it was like a switch, right? This interview started out in English, and the interviewer, we were trying to figure out where she was from. It seemed like she had an accent, maybe from Spain. We were trying to pick it up, but everything was in English. And then all of a sudden, she just busted out in Spanish, and she and Tenoch were just having a conversation. And at the end, the woman was trying to say to Letitia, oh, he's saying these things about you. And she's like, no, he's saying this, which I thought was fantastic. But it was really great to hear him in Spanish next to his English, right? And I find his particular accent was easy for me. Not in all places in Mexico do I have an easy time compared to South America or even to Spain. But Maya, that's one of the reasons I love it. I like it there. But his was easy to understand. And yes, I agree with you, John. I think it would be nice to have him do the dub when they do it in Spanish.
I also
So
I also really liked the way that he portrayed this character. There was no anger at any point. All right, it was very logical. I'm a big fan of Spock from the Star Trek world, and it resonated like a Spock, like here's what's in front of me. Here's how I have to deal with this. Here are the parameters of the way that I will deal with you. If you do this, here are the results. They're very, very logical, unemotional, And at the same time, just really just impassioned vehemence about maintaining his people's culture, even to the point where Ramona dies and he sees her body float up, and he looks at Suri and says, "You're queen now," right? Like it was very matter of fact, and I appreciate moving with the character in that way, because he could have been very emotional and just like all over the place, but he was just very contained. I'm like, here are the facts, right? You let people know about us, and they built a machine and it came for us. You got to fix this. I'll be over here. Let me know when you finish your beer, right? So I really enjoyed that, but I also loved the push and pull that was all the way through the movie of science versus religion, right? Science versus culture, young knowledge versus the old ways, right? And so Suri really pushing Wakandans to be more scientific, and Namor wanting Talokan to stay as a very traditional, old thinking society, and just stay away from all of these new advents. And so and you saw all of those pushes even back and forth, even with the conversations with Suri and M'Baku, right? Where he was like, "Hey, listen, you've got to pay reverence to the fact that you're a queen now, or to what you need to do, and the old ways and the old gods." But she was like, "No, listen, we've got to figure this out with science, right? We've got to come up with technology that will save us." But what's really interesting is the first words of the movie is Bast, right? It's Suri praying to her God to give her the knowledge to create the science to save her brother, right? So even in her own mind, there's this dissidence of where do I place my belief in science or in the old ways?
Well, it was interesting too. I definitely I want to make sure we get to John and talking about the underwater aspects of this, and then kind of wrap up with our final thoughts on the movie and where we should go from here. But yeah, all of that is very looking at all the juxtapositions of the different ways of thinking, and which, by the way, I have to mention, M'Baku is from Trinidad and Tobago as well. Just saying. So Hayden and I mentioned Hayden is Trinidadian. Like, I have overlap with everybody on this panel. This is what I love about my life, right? This is what I love about culture. Is like, oh yeah, I'm part of you too. I'm part of you too. This good, because in most of my life, I'm not part of anything. So this is like fantastic to be in a space where everyone, I relate to everyone. Y'all can relate to me. We get each other, right? And this is what cultures is about. So John, tell us some of the insider secrets, some of the things that you know about these underwater scenes and what these actors really went through. I mean, they went for it. I'm impressed.
Yeah, actually, a lot of the stuff that I learned, actually, I wasn't through actual reporting. It's more listening to them talk to in other interviews. Specifically, like Mabel Cadena was on an interview in Mexico in a podcast called Hablando de Cine Con. And in it, that's where she talks about, trained enough in freediving and in breath hold techniques that she was able to hold her breath for 6.5 minutes.
Which one was this? Suri?
Mabel Cadena, who plays Namora.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
She's the warrior, and who's also at the very end. She's the one who Namor is talking to, and saying, they're gonna have to come to us if they need help, kind of thing. So she's also talked about the fact that learning how to freedive as part of her training basically gave her like the quote unquote mental strength to get through all of her underwater scenes. Because a lot of times, you're going in there, you go down holding your breath for 2, 3, maybe 4 minutes and doing more than one scene. And during that entire time, you cannot show any bubbles coming out of your mouth. You can't if an errant bubble comes out of your mouth, it's got to be reshot completely. They have to and it's in a tank with a whole bunch of other people around you, so you got to make sure you know where to hit your mark, where you're going. Make sure you can still emote even though you're holding your breath, because a lot of times they were speaking underwater. But so that was really interesting, and I'm still not quite sure whether or not they were doing that actually underwater or did it above water with all the effects to make them look like they're doing it underwater. Because if you're talking like this, we talk based on air. So air will come out of your lungs, and you will see air bubbles. So that was a little sort of interesting question in my mind, is whether or not did they actually film them mouthing the words underwater, or did they do that later on in post or in a separate scene? She also talked about Cadena also talked about the fact that she didn't just want to correct technique. She wanted to feel like she lived in the water, and that's what her trainers actually gave her that confidence and ability to be able to do multiple takes underwater without a problem. And Tenoch Huerta couldn't swim at the start of this movie. He had to learn how to A, swim, then B, free dive.
Yeah, when they asked him before the movie started, they said, "Can you swim?" And he said, well, in Spanish, "I never drowned before." But then he talks about having to learn, and he had the floaties on. He a grown man with the floaties trying to learn how to swim, and then look, he has all these scenes, So, just a side note, this is not even, okay, I know the movie's deep. We're talking about all the cultural aspects. Don't laugh at me when I say this. But, I was like, do some people who are filming this have a foot fetish? Because there are some scenes with feet. And I remember when there's this part where Tenoch is, of course, flying. Of course, it's special effects. But his foot just comes straight in the camera. And I think to myself, man, some people are like, they're probably replaying that over and over to try to see how close they got in. Anyway, I digress. But
it's also, he also had feathers, too.
Yeah, the Nemo's source of flight is his winged feet.
Yes.
And so people were really, even when the preview came out, people were really honing into that, and that's one of the ways that Suri ends up disabling him. She pulls off one of his wings. So yeah,
I missed that. I missed that.
Yeah,
she pulls off
you
one
see
of
his
his
leg bandaged up later. Yeah.
I know, right? For real. I need to watch it third time. No, I missed that completely. Wow. John, you were going to say.
Yeah, you see later, like towards the end, you see afterwards, like his leg completely bandaged up. Okay. Like his bottom leg, so yeah.
That's why. All right. Okay. Yeah. Yes, I have to go back. Just another excuse to look at the details.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where he has dominance in the air and the sea, and you don't see very many superhero characters having both of those, right? Like if it's the sea dominance, once they come above land, they're kind of like flailing around. And if it's an air person, they don't have any kind of dominance in the sea, and they wanted to emphasize that Namor has both of those.
Thanks for listening or watching Destinations with Doni. Show your support by rating this episode on your podcast platform, wherever you listen to your podcast. And while you're there, make sure to subscribe to get notifications of new episodes, because you don't want to ever miss out on any of this cross-cultural goodness.